identity, it often feels very personal. But as technology has evolved, we now have something else, a digital identity. It's how the vast world of ones and zeros recognize who we are. But what happens when the digital identity isn't quite right? Or worse, when someone pretends to be you and the lines between truth and deception blur? In this very first episode of Edge of IT, we're diving into all things identity and access management, or IAM, with two experts who live and breathe this field. Kyle Watson, Vice President of Identity and Access Management at Converge, and Alex Kemenov, Lead IAM Solutions Engineer at IBM. After sponsoring a fresh-off-the-press report on identity and access management with the Ponemon Institute, I wanted to go straight to the source to understand the growing threats we face. With phishing attempts and data breaches on the rise, the message is clear. The time to modernize is now. I'm excited to welcome two incredible guests today to the show. Alex, tell me about yourself.
Hi, my name is Alex Kemenov. I've currently have the position of the lead solution engineer at IBM specifically for the identity access management stack. I've been in the position for about 5 years. This is my first foray into a professional career since college graduation. I was a mechanical engineering student. So more or less just applied physics and all that stuff. Nothing really digital or anything. But I got the opportunity, I took it, and it's been awesome because identity is such a much more complex and bigger issue than I first initially realized. And that's probably every organization, every challenge that identity has is a little different, and it's constantly evolving. So I always get to scratch the engineering itch by thinking through these problems and challenges and like working with the team.
Excellent. Kyle, Mr. Watson?
Yes, my name is Kyle Watson. I'm the VP of IAM practice here at Converge. I've been in the identity space since it started. Actually, like Alex, at one point worked at IBM, and my identity career started when IBM acquired their first identity portfolio. I worked there as an architect designing some of the largest financial institutions, identity and access management platforms and things. Decided to leave and start my own company, which of course was an IBM business partner delivering IBM identity solutions. I joined Converge about a year ago. So I joined and brought some of the cohort that I've worked with throughout my career along with me. And we've been partnering with IBM and working in the field to help customers really close those gaps. As you start veering out into the customer landscape, the user journeys now are highly complex because I want to not only authenticate the user, but I want to make sure I'm using progressive profiling to get that user to give me a little bit at a time so that by the time I get them hooked, then I ask them for the last 2 or 3 things, not some big blanket fill form, right? Integrated that with omni-channel situations, like I can use my digital experience on the browser, I can pick it back up on the phone, and if you happen to have a brick and mortar shop, I'm going to carry it in, you're going to know who I am in all of these instances, and I'm sure we've all experienced that with some of these large-scale companies in the past. But yeah, this is got a lot of new frontier, and I think there's a renaissance happening right now in identity, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Well, I'm really excited to dig into this topic with the two of you. So today we're talking about identity and access management, or IAM, through the lens of a new research report that we sponsored through the Ponemon Institute. Is it Ponemon or is it Pokemon?
The Ponemon Institute.
The Ponemon Institute. The findings reveal some critical trends and challenges that organizations are facing in this space. And I'm excited to dig into what they mean for the future of security. Kyle, can you share some of the findings? What did we learn from this report?
So this was really interesting. What sponsored the desire to go out and do this independent research was that IBM's X-Force Threat Intel report said that 71% increase had occurred in breaches that used stolen or compromised credentials year over year. Then the CrowdStrike Threat Intelligence report said 147% increase in access broker advertising, which means selling on the dark web of stolen credentials. And our own report came back with 56% of organizations that were polled had a breach in the last 24 months, due, in fact, to compromised or stolen creds. So when we heard all of this information, we wanted to get out there and see how mature are organizations today? Are they taking identity seriously? And where are they investing their time and energy now? One of the things that's happening to cause all of this credential theft is increase in phishing, increase in social engineering. And so organizations really need to take this seriously so they're not the next headline in the news with a data breach.
Alex, can you start by sharing a little bit more about IBM and what is IAM?
We've all heard about the term identity theft. Somebody going online trying to pretend to be you, stealing your information, basically moving around the digital world as you. And that's essentially what identity and IAM is solving. It's how you move around the digital environment. It ends up encompassing how you get into your application accounts, when you accept cookies in your browser, that tracks if you've been on a website or something else before, any privacy policies that you accept or, maybe ignore, if we're honest, about ourselves. And it ends up protecting a lot of very important things to both organizations and then people as a whole, right? Your 401k accounts end up being protected by these IAM systems. Your personal health data ends up being protected both from access and how it gets distributed around hospitals by identity and IAM systems. And then kind of your everyday bank accounts. So the way I like to think about it is that identity and IAM, it deals with the digital you, more or less, and how that digital you is stored differently in these organizations, how it's leveraged differently in these organizations, and how that information is cross-shared across all these different systems.
So what I think I hear you saying is IAM is just another way of talking about my login information, my password, Active Directory, single sign-on, two-factor authentication, right? Is that where we're talking about?
Well, that's part of it, but that's really like the old world. Today, the world is much more complex. IAM is everywhere. Identities are distributed. They're federated. It's much higher risk. We're integrated with cloud systems. Business and business to business are integrated with identity. The world has moved on since legacy IAM systems that are simply inside the walls of an organization that protect only the internal identities of that corporation. Those older systems, they were more easily compromised. They didn't have capabilities like federation. So you would log in once over here and once over there and once over there. And as you mentioned, SSO and federation was a first step forward there. But we're now moving to an industry shift where it's SaaS delivered identity as a service, cloud delivered consumption-based services. And the world is really transforming in identity right now.
So how did we get here? If what I understand is Active Directory, I thought that was the one thing to rule it all. If that's medieval England, how do we get to 2024? What were some pivotal events in your mind that shaped today?
First thing really is the internet, right? TCP/IP changed everything. So DARPA, a defense agency of the government, invented this protocol that was able to communicate, integrate systems over wide distances. When it became released to the public, we suddenly had a mechanism by which all different organizations, computers, and systems could communicate. Before that, right, it would be that vendors would provide specific protocols. IBM had an SNA protocol, and Novell NetWare had an IPX protocol. And all these protocols required gateways and things to interoperate with each other. Once TCP/IP became adopted and the internet became ubiquitous, it now was the ability to take the next leap forward, which was federation. So in corporations now, instead of in my supply chain, having to have a distinct set of login for you, and then you log into the provider that's supplying parts or components, that logs into the materials manufacturer. Each one of these participants in that supply chain can use one authentication and cross organizational boundaries to share information, share data. A simple way to think about it is if I were in a corporation that had a 401k plan for its employees, and it was a large enough entity, they might have single sign-on from the internet right into the 401k provider, the financial company, using the company's login. So your login, Jonathan, to single sign into like a Fidelity or that type of system. Where we're going, or where we went from there, is we started with something called Web 1. So Web 1.0 is static content, a lot of brochureware. This is like the late 90s to early 2000s. If you were around during that time on the internet, you know that sometimes shopping was simply a credit card experience more than a personalized experience. And then the next iteration is Web 2.0. And Web 2.0 is from the early 2000s to today. And this is where the social environment started picking up. We have a Facebook login, a Gmail login, a login with Apple today. And we're now using these corporations kind of own this identity stack where it's my data, but they really own that stack. And we integrate across organizational boundaries with these identities, digital use, as Alex said. And using that capability, it's really advanced our ability to interoperate. But now what's happening is this privacy concern. And so where we're headed, which is Web 3, which is some years out at this point, but it's just starting to get adopted here and there for specific use cases, is self-sovereign identity and verifiable credentials. So in this way, I own my identity. Maybe it's on my phone. Maybe it's integrated into my laptop. But I own my own birth date. I own my educational credentials. And so if, let's say I go to a site that requires me to be 18 or older, I can prove that I'm over 18 through a verifiable credential without actually providing my birth date, because it is a known piece of data that is part of my identity. And I can decide who gets to see the actual birth date, right? This is where the world is heading. It's based a lot on blockchain technology as the world becomes more distributed.
I think Kyle outlined it very well to kind of bring this to like an average everyday consumer, right? We've become really hardcore integrated into that digital ecosystem. From an organizational perspective, Kyle was mentioning having access to multiple organizational resources with one set of credentials. But even think about it from just a consumer standpoint as well. We walk around with a smartphone in our pockets where you can charge money to your Venmo. That Venmo then deposits it on your bank account. So it's ending up accessing your bank account on your behalf as your own identity. You can sell concert tickets. Your steps and your workouts are recorded on your smartphone or smartwatch. That stuff can get sent to an insurance provider to like do your premiums. So like effectively, we've gone so past Active Directory and SSO and like that world that we really do need to keep in mind about how we've matured and how the infrastructure is matured to deliver those experiences that we currently enjoy today.
At Converge, one of our longest standing partnerships has been with IBM, as their expertise in areas like identity and access management is unmatched. Diving into this topic with Kyle and Alex couldn't have come at a better time, especially as we're seeing a rise in what you might call digital espionage. Now, you might be thinking, sure, Jonathan, phishing and insider-related incidents are on the rise, but how bad can the impact really be? Well, hate to break it to you, but the numbers are not good. According to the 2023 Ponemon report, the stats are loud and clear. The average annual cost of insider-related incidences has skyrocketed to 16.2 million USD. And the average time it takes to contain an insider incident, 86 days. Nearly 3 months for just one incident. Here's the kicker. Organizations that take longer than 90 days to respond end up spending an extra 2.1 million annually on these attacks. So, yes, time is money when it comes to these threats. So, what's the key to tackling this? As Alex mentioned, it comes down to behavior. The question now is, what steps can your organization take to start guarding against these threats on digital identity? That's where we go next. I guess it makes more sense to call it identity, right? Because the digital fingerprint that we leave behind of what we touch on the internet and where we log in really does in many ways define not all of who we are, but part of it. And that information is important, it's powerful. It's so dangerous to have my birthday, my social security number potentially be leaked. So I guess it behooves us as organizations, as individuals, to lock these things down and keep them much more tightly controlled. Given that things are so complex and only getting more complex, the rise of threats and breaches are incredible. How can organizations proactively protect themselves?
We can talk about this in the context of best practices, but to try to simplify it as much as possible, let's think about identity before I log in and use that credential. Then there's while I'm actively using that credential, right? And there's post login to that system or application or service or whatever it is, right? So before a user logs in, of course, somebody has to create that access, right? So if I'm in a corporation, which means I need to centralize that, use the principle of least privilege and centralize identity governance, which means I need a dashboard and a centralized authoritative source that says who has access to what across an organization, right? If I can't answer that question, it means I have to run around to a whole bunch of systems and services and try to figure that out, right? We need that sort of dashboard. That's identity governance. We also want identity verification. And this is partly during onboarding. It's also external for customers and partners. But this is where we're using government-issued identifiers to make sure that the human being behind that access creation is actually that same person, right? So we want to verify that identity. That's sort of pre-login, using the concept of least privilege in that process. Also make sure that if in fact that credential ever is breached, that the access is limited only to what that person should have access to based upon their job function. Now, as we shift from there to while the user is logging in, here we want to make sure that we have strong authentication services. We have multi-factor authentication. We're using zero trust principles, which means I'm not just verifying this person once. Every access thing I try to attempt to access, I'm getting retested and revalidated. I want to ensure that the machine's posture is strong. It's not a compromised or a jailbroken device or something that has a virus on it. I want to make sure that I'm not coming in from unsafe internet locations like a Tor exit node, right? I want to make sure that I haven't simply switched during the authentication process, my impossible travel, they call it. Like I started in Boston and then suddenly I'm in Germany. How did that happen, right? So these are all things we want to check while the user is actually logging in. As we shift into I'm logged in and I'm using the application, now we want continuous monitoring. This is probably the newest frontier in this Web 2.0 world, is that we want continuous monitoring of that session. We want to know, has this user behavior changed? So if I log in typically every day from 8 to 5 and I use Salesforce and I check my email and I go to 2 or 3 applications, but suddenly one day I'm trying to attack 400 servers at one time, we want something monitoring to detect that. Because if it was a stolen credential, you might have been authenticated and authorized properly, right? But we want something to detect the behavioral pattern. I think this is where we start tying in threat intelligence, AI, and that type of technology.
What you're talking about is using your identity to protect your identity.
As a result of our report, we did come up with 5 recommendations. One of them is that continuous monitoring, but it goes, number 1 is to implement MFA. If your organization has not yet implemented MFA, you're already behind. We see the number of credential breaches. If credentials are stolen and there's no other factor to prevent somebody from breaking in, you're probably going to be breached. Second is deploying privileged access management. Now, when administrators go in and make changes to security settings or add and remove users, change firewalls and rules, we want to make sure that those privileges are specially quarantined and we can protect them at a higher degree of integrity. So that's privileged access management. So we want to make sure that that's in place. Then we want to integrate IAM signaling data. So this is where, to detect anomalies, so this is where this new AI type technology comes in. It's also integrating your identity tools with security information and event management systems like SIEM, so that if interesting things are happening, somebody in the security operations center can detect it and take action. We also recommend that organizations align IAM with cybersecurity. As a long-term identity practitioner, I know that identity people are often not thinking about risk first. And then somewhere down the line, security is absolutely important, but in the fray of everything that's going on, sometimes the automation is more the focus. So bringing that risk focus and that rigor of cybersecurity to the table is very important. The last thing is establishing an IAM program. So that's number 5. And that's because identity is integrated across the entire business organization. You can't just get one tool and fix identity. It's business process, it's people, it's managing exceptions. I have to understand how this identity process flows across multiple tools and people and manage that.
I mean, this sounds like it's a multi-dimensional problem, right? It's not just one threat vector. It's massive number of threat vectors in addition to other points of contact that need to be used to keep things secure, right? Generative AI is emergent. It's been 2 years since ChatGPT came out, and agentic systems are growing and becoming more and more powerful. I could see how that's could be really challenging. Alex, how is AI influencing IAM specifically?
I love that question. There's 2 ways, and specifically like at IBM, we're examining like 2 sets of use cases with ML and AI and how they're influencing identity. The first one is how current identity systems can leverage AI and ML to better perform the tasks that they're assigned to. And the other set is how AI can then, or AI models can execute specific identity-related tasks and kind of make it easier for an administrator or somebody else that's managing those systems to perform their day-to-day functions. Kyle mentioned a lot of great things in terms of what types of events we're monitoring, like firewall permissions, et cetera, right? What identity systems really look at is the interactions of the digital you with other parts of like different systems. So effectively, we're establishing behavior, right? So how do we catch fraudulent behavior? Let's look back at like the identity theft example, right? How did somebody steal somebody's identity in the past before the internet? Oh, how did a spy when they infiltrated the other side? How did they steal an identity? They assume a persona, they put on a uniform, and they go in. How does that other organization or person or whatever detect that that person is a foreign adversary? It's exclusively by behavior. So the same rules apply on the digital front as well, right? So on the digital front, we're also trying to see behavior, but the minutia is like very high frequency, right? All these transactions are happening, logs are happening. How do you detect it? So AI and machine learning models are very, very good at being able to sift through that and be able to detect those behavioral anomalies and being able to go through all those fingerprints of ML and AI models to reduce the time it takes to detect an anomaly like that. And in our offerings for a very long time, we've been successfully integrating those models for a few years now to be able to see if the person that's getting in is the same as they were a few hours ago, or has there been any deviation or changes. And those things are really good from identity solutions to fraud solutions. And you can go even past, like we've talked about, applications and like 401k applications, et cetera, fidelity accounts. You can take those same type of models and apply them deeper into the network and actually look at your service accounts, how the service accounts behave in your cloud infrastructure, how machine accounts behave on your network. And there it gets way more granular because things are moving at a much faster speed than just a human interacting with an application. There are API calls being made, et cetera. So at that point, using ML models to analyze your network becomes paramountly important. So let's take that other use case where we're leveraging AI to execute certain tasks, right? With all of this data and understanding of our system that AI and ML can empower, we can start going into what Kyle was referring, like continuous monitoring and adaptation, where those systems, as they see these anomalies come in, they can proactively mitigate against them and maybe change an access policy, maybe orchestrate something where a user gets blocked for a little bit amount of time and the actual administrator doesn't need to go in to do that per se. Now, again, I'm going to say that that's a new space. Gen AI and large language models definitely accelerated it. So a very interesting conversation is like, how do you intelligently put those systems in place? Because it's going to become of a question of who watches the watchers, right? You have this AI or ML system like doing these changes based on the data. How do you know it's analyzing the data correctly, et cetera? So that's where kind of the governance of the models and everything comes into play.
What I hear you saying is that AI is a game changer in this space in so many different ways. I like how you said it, the digital you. So AI in many ways is going to assist in profiling and creating that digital me. Therefore, it would then know it's not you, or it's higher probability that it's not you. And then an organization would then need to set a threshold for tolerance and security when somebody deviates too far from behavior to then sort of enact security policies, those privileges.
Yeah, no, I think that's, Jonathan, I think that's exactly right. And the cool and the reason why this space is so interesting is because that's different for every single organization, right? And the way they solve for that when those thresholds are reached are going to end up being different because of the data that they have access to or that they're housing, et cetera. I love the fifth point of Kyle's best practices in terms of having a program is that how you implement the program and the tools that you select that end up being the ones that are responsible of like doing the tactical day-to-day implementation of that program need to be modular, need to be customizable enough for you to be able to respond to all of your needs, all of the changing organizational needs that are aligning with regulation, with new threat vectors, new technologies, while also still kind of keeping your core safe.
Are we heading towards like a convergence of all of these different ways to secure IAM roles? If I'm a mattress seller or I'm selling rugs, the security access privileges of someone logging in there is going to be at a certain threshold, which should be and very different than, say, a doctor or pharmacist logging into a system that has PII, PHI. You've got a spectrum of security needs. It would seem to me that we need to have more of a convergence on best practices and standards, right?
Yeah, I think there has to be a way to get started with this type of stuff. And there are sort of two sides to it. One side is cybersecurity frameworks like National Institute of Standards or NIST exist so that people don't miss things, right? Everybody sort of has a guide to follow. So they have a special publication, Digital Identity Guidelines, covers a lot of the end-to-end. That's not tooling specific, but it's really about how you implement certain controls. Then research analyst companies, they publish like maturity models for your IAM. So what you want to do is sort of, first of all, think about what's right size for your organization, and then really start your journey with understanding your maturity first, right? So at Converge, we commonly do this with something called the IAM workshop. We review the current state of your IAM program, identity governance and administration, access management, privileged access management, and zero trust to kind of get an understanding of the landscape and give our customers an idea of where should they focus their energy and money to try to revamp their identity programs. And the second thing is getting back to this IAM program again, what Alex and I have both been saying, it's important to build a committee. You need a cross-functional team. You need executive sponsorship and support. Human resources has to be involved, right? They own a lot of the relationships with identities. There might be a contract management group, might need this for those third parties, might be vendor management involved. Legal needs to be involved because there are various agreements that organizations make that they need to ensure that they're meeting. Compliance, right, to measure some of those agreements. So it's really a cross-functional team that can help direct, and steer where the identity investments are made.
Oh, that's super helpful. Trying to think through the conversation we've had so far, right? What I hear is many organizations are getting breached, and maybe it's not if, but when someone tries to breach you. If we are still in the Stone Ages or medieval Europe Active Directory, organizations need to be thinking about how they're moving towards a more secure world. We have an identity, a personal identity, but also a digital identity that is crucial to organizations securing their internal secrets and individuals' personal access. And so as we move forward, as more AI technology is getting released, more advancements, organizations need to sit down and start considering how to modernize, how to come up to speed and be prepared for the next threat.
Jonathan, I think you hit the nail on the head. Start simple. You can't protect what you don't know you have. You don't know what kind of controls or policies or reactions you need to have to certain threats if you don't know what you even have. That's gonna really let you know if you're in the Stone Ages, if you're in the modern age, if you're even ready for AI. I know all the stuff we said with AI is like, it's all cool and stuff, but if you don't have the bare bones stuff in place, it doesn't even make sense. It's like buying a Ferrari when you don't even know how to drive.
Hey, mate, look, Ferrari is nice to look at, right? And show off. You don't have to drive it to enjoy it. It's a collectible, but you're right. There's a difference between just looking at it and getting behind the wheel. This has been a great conversation. Exciting to hear about your report, and I've definitely learned a lot. So Kyle and Alex, thank you so much for joining me today. And for those of you listening in, we'll make sure that we put the link to the report in the show notes. And if you want to reach out to any of us to get more information, please don't hesitate.
Hey, Jacques.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. What a fantastic way to kick off the very first episode of Edge of IT. Exploring topics like digital identity is absolutely crucial because, let's face it, these issues are only going to become more important over time. From Kyle's insights on how to bring your organization out of the Stone Age when it comes to access and identity management, to Alex's advice on leveraging AI to spot unusual behaviors, today's conversation was packed with what can only be described as timely information. On that note, we are just getting started. So, for more information, visit our website at convergetp.com and make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Until next time.